Well, this wasn't a video I wanted to be making, but there's actually been something quite sneakily dropped to do with the stocks and shares ISA, and it could mean, yep, paying tax inside of an ISA. And honestly, I wish this was a clickbait headline, I really do. When I saw someone comment this, I thought, there's no way. But I've done some digging, and unfortunately, it seems to have some legs. I'm hoping this gets quashed, but I want to get ahead of the rumours because once this gets out, it's going to be everywhere. I've had a manic week with the budget, and now I'm here on the weekend in between planting 20 hedges before it gets dark at 3 PM, and I've had to get this out. If you could do me a favour and just make sure you're subscribed to this channel with notifications on, because I know not everyone is actually subscribed and these videos just pop up on your feed. Because when stuff like this happens, I want you to know immediately before you get hit with a ton of scaremongering headlines. Okay, so what's happened? Well, hopefully by now you've seen that in Rachel Reeves' budget, she announced that she's cutting the cash ISA allowance from £20,000 down to £12,000 for anyone under 65, which we expected because the government wants more people investing in stocks and shares because it should give people more growth. Well, that's the official reasoning. I mean, let's be honest, it'll also generate a ton more tax for people who still won't use shares. But here's the part nobody saw coming, because completely separate from that budget speech, HMRC has quietly published a set of proposed measures and anti-avoidance steps, as they call it, that they are developing. And they hid them right at the bottom of something called the Tax-Free Savings newsletter. I'm sure you read that. Yeah, right. Now, to be totally clear, these are not final rules. They still need to go through consultation with the ISA industry, and they'll eventually need legislation before anything becomes law. I mean, for the love of God, please let the ISA industry give them a hard no. But this newsletter gives us the clearest signal of what HMRC are planning behind the scenes. And there's 3 measures that they've outlined that I want to break down for you in plain English, because once you understand them, you'll see exactly why this is going to worry people. So let's take each of these one by one, and each one gets more concerning. Measure number 1, and this one is actually quite a big deal. They intend to introduce a ban on transfers from stocks and shares ISAs into cash ISAs. So what would be the problem with that? Well, right now you can put money into a stocks and shares ISA, and if any point in the future you decide you want to de-risk or just sit in cash for a bit, you can transfer that whole ISA into a cash ISA if you want to. That's been normal and people do it all the time, and it's part of the flexibility of the system. But under this new proposal, that becomes a one-way street. You can go from a cash ISA to stocks and shares ISA, but you can't go the other way back. And the reason they're doing this is pretty simple. They've cut the cash ISA limit to £12,000, and they don't want people bypassing that limit by putting £20,000 in stocks and shares ISA, leaving it there for a bit, and then just later shuffling it into the cash one. That workaround is going to be gone. So once your money is in a stocks and shares ISA, it pretty much has to stay within that world of investments. You can't later decide, actually, I want the safety of a cash ISA instead. You'd have to pull it out of the stocks and shares ISA and then manually add it to the cash ISA, which would have the same limit. And of course, then you would use up your new allowance. Now, is this the end of the world? No. But it is a huge change for anyone who likes to de-risk later in life, or anyone who moves between cash and investments depending on what's going on in the market or in their lives. Perhaps you've just got something big coming up and you need to have more cash. And remember, these measures only apply to people under 65. So we're literally creating a 2-tier ISA system based on age, which just adds confusion. Now, speaking of adding confusion, let's talk about measure number 2, and this is where things start getting messy. HMRC are saying they want to introduce a test, their word, to decide whether something inside a stocks and shares ISA is truly an investment or whether they call it cash-like. Now, let me explain why this tiny phrase is causing a massive amount of confusion, because cash-like has no definition right now, which feels like HMR saying, we'll know it when we see it, which doesn't fill me with confidence. And until HMRC pushes the criteria, nobody knows exactly what they're planning to include in this test. But here's why that matters. Now, there's a lot of perfectly legitimate low-risk investment products that could technically be described as cash-like. You've got money market funds, ultra-short duration bond funds, short-dated gilts, even some corporate bond funds and other instruments. Now, you probably don't use all of them, but they are used by normal investors to manage risk, and by platforms when you switch funds, and even by pension providers like Nest, Vanguard, HL, AJ Bell, everyone. And here's the important thing. All of those sit inside a stocks and shares ISA today perfectly legally. We use them because they're safer during volatility. You might be waiting just to buy something and you don't want to sit 100% in cash. You want to make your money work for you in the meantime. Default portfolios use them, robo-advisors rely on them, and even big managed portfolios hold these instruments. So if HMRC decides to draw this line too broadly, and the fear is that suddenly millions of people could be holding something inside the ISA that gets reclassified as cash-like. And then what? Do platforms have to flag them? Would investors be asked to move out of them? Would low-risk funds suddenly sit in some kind of grey zone? We simply just don't know, and that's a problem. This isn't people trying to dodge rules. These are totally normal tools used by every sensible investor to reduce risk. And again, this will only be under 65, which means the exact same investment might be treated differently depending on your age. It's so bizarre. And it feeds directly into measure number 3, which, in my opinion, is the most concerning of the lot. And this is the one everyone's going to be terrified by and talking about. HMRC has said they want to introduce, again, their wording, a charge on any interest paid on cash held inside a stocks and shares or innovative finance ISA. Now, let me say that again slowly because it sounds unbelievable. A charge on interest earned on cash inside a stocks and shares ISA. Now, before anyone panics, that doesn't mean they're taxing your investments. They're not talking about your funds, your ETFs, or your shares, or your growth. This is specifically about cash that sits inside your stocks and shares ISA. But here's the issue. Everyone, literally everyone, ends up holding cash inside a stocks and shares ISA at some point. I mean, just think about it. When you sell an investment and you haven't bought one yet, when you're drip feeding money into the market, when dividends land as cash, when funds take a few days to settle during platform transfers, and when platforms hold a small cash buffer for fees, or when you're simply just waiting for the right moment to invest a lump sum, none of this is unusual, none of this is dodging the rules, this is just how investing works. So the big question that nobody has the answer to yet is at what point does normal cash, sitting there for totally normal reasons, suddenly become cash that triggers a charge, which, let's face it, is a way of saying tax. Is it based on how long it sits there, how much it earns, your average balance, a percentage of your portfolio? We absolutely have no clarity, and that's the problem. Because if you earn a few £1,000s of interest during a period where you had cash between trades, I mean, does that count? If you receive dividends as cash, then you reinvest them monthly, does that count? If you've just transferred your ISA and the money is waiting to be allocated, does that count? This is why the industry is going to be extremely nervous about this one. It's not the scale of the charge, we don't know what it will be. It would be the administrative nightmare of dealing with what counts as chargeable cash versus normal, unavoidable investor behavior. And would have the same age rule. So again, we're looking at a system where two people could have the same portfolio, the same cash balance, and the same behavior, but the younger person gets hit with a charge and the older person doesn't, which is possibly the first time in history anyone has been punished for being too young while trying to invest responsibly. I don't think I've ever seen an ISA proposal create this much confusion from just a couple of sentences. And this is why these 3 measures together, the transfer ban, the cash-like test, and now a charge on cash, have the potential to make the ISA system far more complicated than it ever has been. But now let's talk about what this actually means and why this is so worrying, because on their own each of these measures sounds irritating, but when you put them side by side, this is where the real concern comes from. The ISA system has always worked because it's simple. You pay in, you invest, and everything inside that wrapper grows tax-free. There are no strange rules to follow, no technical definitions to worry about, and no traps to catch you out. The simplicity is why millions of people trust stocks and shares ISAs, and these proposals completely undermine that simplicity. We would suddenly have a ban on ever moving money back into a cash ISA, a brand new cash-like investment test with absolutely no definition, and potentially a charge on interest on earned cash that sits inside of a stocks and shares ISA for a period of time. Now, here's the key point. So most people inside a stocks and shares ISA aren't doing anything wrong. Cash appears naturally as part of normal investing, and this is where this change concerns me because money market funds become such a big part of the conversation. A huge number of investors use money market funds as a safe corner inside the stocks and shares ISA, and this is a great way around the new cash ISA limits, which is potentially why they're doing this. They're very low risk and they're incredibly stable. They're used by platforms, robo-advisors, pension providers, model portfolios, basically every single part of the investing world. They're the standard way to park your money in an ISA without it just sitting in cash and get eaten away by inflation. So most of us, me included, have been saying, well, don't panic about the new cash ISA limit, just use these instead. But under these proposals, money market funds could also easily fall into this new category of cash-like. If HMRC decides to behave too similarly to cash, or that they're close enough to cash to be caught by the rules, then you've suddenly got millions of people holding something inside their ISA that becomes unclear overnight. And once ambiguity exists, it creates confusion for platforms, confusion for advisors, investors, and a potential wave of hassle for anyone who uses these completely normal, sensible, low-risk funds. We could end up with a charge on investments inside a tax-free ISA. It sounds unbelievable to say. These proposals would just introduce uncertainty into a system that's always been predictable and easy to understand. When the rules become vague, people get confused, and when people get confused, confused, they either make mistakes or avoid investing altogether. And that completely goes against the whole point of lowering the cash ISA allowance in the first place, which was to encourage more people to invest, not just scare them off. Now, of course, if these proposals were to go ahead in anything close to the current suggested form, people would start looking for alternatives. Some might think, well, maybe I'll just put more into my pension, or maybe I'll just use a general investment account instead. But none of these actually solve the problem. Pensions lock away your money for decades, and general investment accounts leave you much more exposed to tax on the interest and your capital gains. So it's not like there's some simple, obvious fallback option, and for most people, the Stocks and Shares ISA is that tool that gives you the flexibility that you need. For most normal people, especially beginners, the Stocks and Shares ISA isn't just an investment account, it's a first step they take into the world of investing. It's the most beginner-friendly, the most flexible, and the least intimidating option we have here in the UK. And if we suddenly make that system more complicated and we start talking about these cash-like tests, anti-avoidance measures, and possibly charges on perfectly normal behaviour, we don't push people into good financial decisions. We push them away from investing altogether. Think about someone opening their first ISA. They deposit the money, they haven't even picked their fund yet, and straight away they're worrying, is this cash allowed? Is this a cash-like investment? Am I breaking some kind of rule I didn't know existed? They just panic and run a mile, and once they're scared off, they're just not going to come back. And that's not what we want. Not when the entire goal here is supposed to be encouraging people to invest for the long term. Now, I want to be really clear on this next part because this is important. These proposals are not final and they're not law. They still have to go through consultation and the ISA industry, which hopefully will push back very hard on the parts that simply don't make any sense. It'd be great if they would consult with us. I mean, I'll tell them. And I want to reassure you, your investments inside a Stocks and Shares ISA are not suddenly becoming taxable. Your funds, your ETFs and your shares, none of that is what HMRC are talking about here. But these proposals do show the direction that they're exploring, and that direction causes a lot of legitimate questions about how simple the ISA system will be in the future. So the key takeaway right now is don't panic when you see these scary headlines. Nothing has changed today, your ISA is still tax-free, your investments are still protected, and I will update you the second HMRC releases more detail or clarifies what counts as a cash-like investment. They're definitely putting these measures in place to stop people trying to avoid the loopholes, but it could create an entire mess. This is one of these moments where the headlines that are going to come are going to scare people, and I want you to hear the facts before that happens. These are early proposals hidden away in a newsletter that nobody reads, and they raise far more questions than answers right now. In the meantime, just keep using your normal Stocks and Shares ISA as normal, and let me know, do you think these measures are fair, or do you think they'll end up confusing people and putting beginners off investing altogether? Because I think this reaction is going to be very mixed once it hits the mainstream media by terrifying people with these headlines. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe with notifications on so you don't miss these updates, especially when this story develops. And if you found this helpful, give it a like so more people can actually see the facts before the scaremongering headlines arrive. Thanks for watching, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next one.